Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Kate Kelley, also known as the Photo Angel. So welcome, Kate, and thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled because I think what you do is just totally amazing. So obviously, you're on the Italian Sunday dinner, but you're not Italian. I'm assuming you're at least part Irish. So what's your nationalities and your roots?
Oh, right. So I'm English on both sides. I'm German on both sides, and I'm Norwegian on my father's side. The Irish comes from my married name, Kelly.
Yeah, I forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few Kelly friends myself, but without the E. That's,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
and so you live in Massachusetts. You know, my nephew and his wife, they live in Sterling. So I don't think
Oh,
you're too
okay.
far, right?
No, that's not too far at all.
So now have you researched your family's roots?
I have, and I was so blessed to have a grandmother and a grandfather on opposite sides of the family who had done so much research before I even came into the pictures, and my great aunt as well. So it was just wonderful. I was able to take that foundation that they had given me, and once the internet came into play, it just expanded, and I found exciting things that I never knew before.
That's really, really cool. So what exciting things did you find, or any skeletons in the closet? Or,
So through my research, I learned that on my dad's side, I'm a descendant of Governor William Bradford on the Mayflower. So that was really exciting,
wow.
right? And that I always heard that I was eligible to join the Daughters of the American Revolution, but I had the bare bones. So I was able to, using all of the vital records and acquiring those, prove my lineage and join the DAR, which is so much fun. I'm an active member in our local chapter.
That's really neat. You know, my daughter should do that because, as I said in the pre-interview, my daughter's adopted. My son, both my
Right.
children are adopted.
Right.
And Nicole she descends from Daniel Boone.
Oh, oh,
And I didn't know this until I did the research that Daniel Boone is a descendant of Captain Morgan, the pirate.
really? No, I
Yeah.
never knew that
Yeah.
either.
So, uh, and she's had several in the family, you know, from the Revolution. They came through, I think, into Virginia, and then
Mhm.
eventually settled in South Carolina. And yeah, so her family goes way, way back. And she's also a distant cousin of Princess Di.
Oh my goodness. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
she's a dispenser. So,
That's awesome.
um, so the reason I have you here is because I think you do the most amazing work.
Thank you.
And for people who don't know about Kate,
Mhm.
uh, she spends her weekends going through old photos in antique stores and garage sales and places like that, and then tries to place those photos with the family, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. It's a labor of love, and I feel that it's my calling. Like I said before, I've grown up with genealogy. I've loved genealogy for so long, and just about 2 years ago now, my mom and I were going through some old family photos and separating them into piles. People we knew who were our relatives, and people who were friends of the family or war buddies or neighbors, people that meant something to my grandparents, but now we're a couple of generations removed. So I thought, let's try and get these photos back to where they belong, back to their family members. And that's kind of how it all started. And because I was familiar with the genealogy websites, I went on to ancestry.com and I looked up the names on the backs of the photos, and I met with success. This gentleman from Tennessee responded and he said, "This is so exciting. You have a pile of photos of my relatives." And I'm speechless and I can't wait to see them.
So now these were photos that you had in your family
That's right.
that you were able to connect with somebody
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of miles
Right.
away. And
Right.
now was he a family? Now was he a cousin or so? So
No, he was honestly, I don't know exactly how my great aunt made the connection to him. This is kind of what our family thinks. So the last name in our family, my mother's maiden name is Strawn, Straun, and this gentleman's last name was spelled Straun. So at some point in time, pre-internet, I'm going way back into the 1940s, she had made this connection with these Tennessee Strauns. We could never make the blood connection, but they became really good friends, and we had photos of my family visiting them down in Tennessee and vice versa. And so it was just, it's still a mystery. It's one of those questions where you kick yourself because you wish you had asked when the person was still alive. But yeah, somehow they were connected.
And I thought it was interesting that you said way back in the 1940s. I was born in 1951, so
Right.
I'm way back there.
All right, parents are watching. Sorry, guys.
It's frightening to think my dad would be 100 years old this year. Could you imagine?
Oh, God bless him. That's wonderful.
That's like it's so odd to even to think about,
Wow.
something like that. So, what's the without giving away any secrets that you don't want to give away. So what's the process? How do you do this?
Right. So it starts with labeled photos. A lot of times people will ask, what can I do if I don't have any information on the photo? And unfortunately for the Photo Angel project, there's not much you can do at this point with an unlabeled photo. I don't use photo recognition technology. I get that question often as well. Yeah. So preferably first name, last name, and location. You can get away with no location if the surname is atypical, but John Smith with no location isn't going to get you very far.
Well, yeah, and, we Italians are lucky that, and I didn't know this until a couple of years ago. I was doing some research, and there's over 300,000 unique surnames in Italy. Because people were named just for the strangest things, the way they look, the way they act, where they came from. I have a good friend. His name is Nick Ducato, which a Ducati was money back then. So it's the 7 Ducati. So you start thinking through your thing. Well, maybe the guy owed 7 Ducati. Maybe he found 7. Who knows? Right. But that's how they got the name.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I was told that my maiden name Norton means north of the town in England. I remember my grandmother sharing that with me.
Oh, yeah. See, so there you go. That makes sense. That makes sense. So now you go to antique places, and do you go to the same ones? Do you go to different places in New England? Where do you go?
So I have my old standbys, if you will, but I like to try new places. Yeah. We're a family that's out and about. So, if we're traveling somewhere, we'll make sure that we find an antique store to stop at and poke around in. They are treasure troves of genealogical information. I encourage you to check your local antique store out if you want to try the Photo Angel project or just to browse around. You would be shocked at how much is in there as far as family items go.
Yeah, and I go in there sometimes, and I like looking at I've never bought anything, but I like looking at like the buttons.
Right.
And sometimes there's medals and things like that.
Right.
And did they sometimes have a history with them? Those kinds of things?
Yes, they do. And although I focus primarily on photos, I have acquired and purchased items that are labeled that I return to family members as well.
Oh, wow. That's so
Books and diplomas, baptismal certificates.
And you find these in these antique places?
Yes, and I chatted with the antique store owners in the preliminary stages of the project because I was curious how they were acquiring all of these items, and they said, generally speaking, most of the items end up in antique stores because of estate sales. People pass on, things end up in the antique stores.
Wow. So I want to ask you, who's the most famous person that you found?
That's a great question, and I have an answer for you. So it's not the person in the photo. It was a Civil War officer. And through my research, I learned that this Civil War officer was the ancestor of Franklin Graham, Reverend Billy Graham's son. So I returned it to him, and he was so kind as to write a letter back to me thanking me for returning this photo.
Yeah, and I saw that photo, and we have a Billy Graham connection.
Ah.
My dad took Billy Graham's photo in 1955 in New York City. My dad worked for the Daily News.
Love it.
And he took his photo on the steps of, like it looked like a park or a library or something like that, holding a Bible. And 1955,
Right.
who knows who Billy Graham even was? I don't
Right.
think he was really that famous yet, although he had a big speaking engagement in New York City. Yeah, I have.
That's great.
I have so many cool photos that my dad took back in the 50s and 60s of, I think, a couple of the greatest ones, and I'll post a few. He's Ole Cassini and Grace Kelly together.
Wow. My wedding gown was by Ole Cassini.
There you go. Well, I'll send you that picture so you could see.
Wonderful.
And he also, Jerry Lewis, Jackie Gleason.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Elizabeth Taylor. And I'll tell you an interesting story about Elizabeth Taylor when she married Nicky Hilton.
Yeah.
I don't even, who Nicky Hilton is?
Yes.
Because you weren't, back to the 40s. But we were watching this, I guess it was a 3 or 4 part documentary on the Hiltons. And they talk about Nicky Hilton and Elizabeth Taylor getting married, and they showed them on the boat in New York City, leaving for England or for Paris, wherever. And then they panned the dock, and they went by like this, real fast.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, my father was in that picture. And she says, how could you know that?
Yeah.
I said, I know my father. I said, I know it was him. So now I had to go to YouTube. I had to find this documentary.
Yeah.
I had to find the Nicky Hilton, go through it. And sure enough, and at the time, he was doing newsreels for the local WPIX, Channel 11 in New York. And he was on the dock. And I just knew, I could see once I stopped it and I saw it.
Yeah.
Sure enough, that was him back in 1950 something or something like that.
How exciting is that?
It was crazy because I'm telling you, Kate, they panned so quickly through this thing. I don't know how he saw it. I guess you know your dad, and you know the way he stands, and you know the haircut and all of that.
Right.
So we went through the most famous person.
Yes.
What's the strangest, weirdest thing that you found?
Well, it's actually one of my favorite photos. It's a photo of this woman, and she's holding a Gila monster. Now, Gila monsters, as far as I understand, are dangerous, and it's very strange to be holding a Gila monster. So that one was definitely in my oddities photos. And I'm an animal lover, so I just loved it. I thought, wow, this woman is so cool, so brave, and it spoke to me.
And so, what year was that? What year was that from?
Oh, it had to be in like the 1940s again. Yeah, yep. And I believe it was. Oh, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was from New Hampshire. There was some sort of New Hampshire connection, and this woman had an oddities store in New Hampshire. And so when I was doing research on her, because I like to build a little story behind the people in the photos, I learned all kinds of fascinating things about this woman and the types of items that she had in her shop. It was very peculiar and very, very interesting.
Yeah, there used to be I never went there, but I know there was a real strange place in New York City. I don't know if it's still there or not.
Okay.
But I have mentioned this on the previous broadcast that I did, because we were talking about Brooklyn and everything. And my dad used to have to go to Houdini's grave every year.
Oh.
Because he was supposed to come back.
Oh.
So
Right.
every year his wife would go there, and it was Cypress Hill Cemetery in Brooklyn, and my father would have to, at Halloween no less. Every Halloween he used to have to go there.
Oh my gosh. No thanks.
So somebody, David Norton, said, "Don't forget Louisa May Alcott."
Oh, that's my dad. Oh, he's so
Okay.
cute.
Hello, Dad.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I grew up hearing stories about how I was cousins with Louisa May Alcott. Yes. Thank you, Dad.
And he's ancient like me, your dad. Yeah,
That's
so,
right.
yeah,
That's
there you
right.
go. We have something in common.
Made in the 1940s.
Yeah. Well, it's my brother was born in 46 and I was born in 51.
Okay.
And for Italian citizenship, I could go through my mother's family, but my brother can't. Because they passed a law in 1948 that prohibits you from
Oh,
doing that.
really? That's interesting. I
Yeah,
didn't realize that. Huh.
So it all just depends
Yes.
on when you were born.
Right.
So now you live in Massachusetts, and I mentioned my nephew lives in Sterling. So that must be a great hunting ground. Yeah, way up there.
Oh, yes. And yes, the treasure troves of our antique stores are treasure troves, and there are quite a few. We have a lot in central Massachusetts. They seem to be the hotbed for antique stores in this area. And, antique stores are hit or miss. Sometimes I go in and I come out empty-handed, and sometimes I go in like, how much money do I have? I want to take it all home, right? So yeah, it's fun to explore different ones because you never know what's around the next corner.
Yeah. Now, do people do they send you their photos, or do they send you photos they find?
Yes, actually, back to the Franklin Graham story. That was a photo that came to me in an album that someone had purchased at not an antique store. It was a Goodwill in Florida, and there were several Civil War generals and officers, as well as other folks in this particular album. And so she had heard about the project, and she said, "Hey, my friend acquired this photo album. Would you like it for your project?" She thought maybe I'd be interested in it because its origins were in the town in New York where she came from, Hempstead. And she said, I didn't have anybody that was in the album that I was related to. So here you go. Work your magic. See if you can return these photos. And I'm so grateful for that album. Yeah, people have been extremely generous. They'll send photos, letters. I've gotten mortgage papers, all kinds of things in the email, in the regular mail.
That's pretty neat. So Kathy asked me a question. So actually, Kathy, it was Daniel Boone, not Davy Crockett. However, there is a great genealogist guy. His name is Kai White, and he lives in Texas. He's a West Point graduate, and he does, and this may interest you, Kate. He does genealogy charts of Americans that have gateway ancestors. So, and he does a chart in a different way in that he doesn't do your typical, mother, father type, grandfather, grandmother type of chart. But what he does is he puts the coat of arms up there for the people, and he traces the lines back, and he really does a great thing. So anybody listening now or to the replay, if you have a gateway ancestor, Kai White, Kywhite, and he's on Facebook, and he's a really, really cool guy.
That is cool.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy. And when I did it, I knew what he did, and I said, "Can you do my Italian family, noble family?" And he said, "I don't know. I've never done Italians before." But it turned out that he was able to do it. So
that's great.
Yes, Dana. Hi, how are you? And yep, my daughter is My adopted daughter is from Daniel Boone, and I thought that was really cool. Anybody really interesting in your family that you know of? I know you talked about the revolutionary thing. Oh, how about your husband's family? I didn't ask about you. Have you tracked it?
Oh, there's family folklore. I don't think we've proved it yet, but there was an Arctic explorer on his side of the family.
Oh, that's neat.
Yes.
That's pretty neat.
Very neat.
And that was an Arctic explorer who made it back?
I believe so.
A lot of them didn't come back.
If he was a direct descendant, yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think. So what advice do you have for people, whether they want to start genealogy or whether they
Right.
have photos or they want to look for
Right.
photos?
Right. So my advice is to start with your own family photos. See if there are pictures in there, labeled photos of people that you don't know. Maybe they were friends or war buddies of your grandparents or great grandparents. Start there, see if there's photos that you can use to try and track down relatives. And if you find that you don't have any photos that meet that criteria, then I would encourage you to check out your local antique store and search for photos that have first and last names and locations. Please don't get discouraged if you flip through photo upon photo upon photo with nothing on it. Sometimes that happens, and it makes it even more exciting when you find one that is labeled. It's like a diamond in the rough.
And what about newspapers? Do you go back and look at newspapers and things?
So I use newspapers.com in my research. My three main tools that I use are Find a Grave, which is free, My Heritage, and Ancestry. And I also use newspapers.com to check out the obituaries on the people, because that tells their life story. And it just, all of these pieces working together complete the life story of the person in the photograph. And then I share it in the Photo Angel Facebook group.
Yeah, that's good. And that's what I tell everybody. I always tell them, start with grandma or the oldest cousin.
Yes.
And you never know what you're going to find by asking around. I found the strangest things in the strangest places.
Right. I know.
And I even found, talk about newspapers. I found my father was born in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. I still don't know why, because my grandparents lived in New Jersey, and Scotch Plains was the middle of nowhere back then. But I found obituaries in the New Jersey papers about my grandmother and grandfather's family in Italy. So they were still living in Italy. They passed away, but it was a small newspaper. They must have had like a who's who section or something like that.
Right.
And they referenced these people over in Italy, and I found things that I didn't know.
Right. Yes, I know. They really are. They're treasures.
And one of the other things that I found through newspapers and things like that is just keep poring over, keep Googling things. I found out that I had a Swiss great-grandmother, second great-grandmother.
All right.
And she lived in Naples. She married my grandfather, and her father was in the Swiss Guard.
Wow.
And you always associate the Swiss Guard with the Pope, right? But
right.
They were actually mercenaries.
Oh, wow.
To some of the countries in Europe. And they were there. They were part of the Neapolitan army. This was before Italy was united. And I went out there and I just Googled Swiss records or something like that.
Right.
And I found a site, and they said, if you have questions about Swiss genealogy, write us in English, Italian, or German. And so I told her name was Elisa Moore. I knew she was a prominent family. And they sent me a link to the records of the prominent families of Lucerne going back to the 1300s.
Oh, my goodness.
and all handwritten stuff.
Wow.
So, I tell people all the time, you don't give up.
Yeah, right.
Just keep searching. Sometimes you have to walk away for a little while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is wonderful advice.
Because, you walk away and then you come back and all of a sudden it's there. And
Yes, that's so true. I have an elusive Civil War ancestor that likes to give me a little hint every 10 years.
that's funny.
My cousin and I found him in West Virginia. Our family never knew that. My family's from Connecticut originally. And we tracked him down using the 1870 census, West Virginia, because we had heard stories about how he never came back to Connecticut. And we're like, where did he end up? And sure enough, we got him, but we don't know where he died and where he is buried. So that's the next mystery. Have yet to find out those pieces of information. In another 10 years, he'll probably let me know.
Well, and that happens. I interviewed Paul Nautra from FamilySearch.org. He's one of the executives there. And
Cool.
he told me a story that he was looking for, I don't know if it was, I think it was his grandmother's birth record. She was born in New Jersey. He couldn't find it. And he couldn't find it. And he was going to a seminar in Pennsylvania to do a talk. And he said, I was on my way out and I looked up and I said, Grandma, help me. So he goes to this conference. He said, I'm in our booth, and I look over and I see this woman who's got a tag that says that she's from the New Jersey archives. So he says, I went over and asked her. I told her the name. She kind of looked at me like, okay, whatever.
Right.
And walked away. And he said, well, I tried, right?
Right.
He said the next day, she comes up to him just before he's about to give his talk, and she hands him an envelope. And she says, open this after you do your talk. He did his talk. He opened it up, and it was the record that he was looking for.
Oh, I love it. Oh, my gosh.
So I'm a firm believer that nothing's an accident.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. Oh, my dad again. He's prompting me. What did I forget to talk about?
That's good. It's good we have him on.
He's so cute. Let's see. What does it say? What about the photo your grandfather in Austria after World War II was? Oh, right. So my dad's an expert on World War II, and he had this photo of his dad, my grandfather, with his buddies in World War II. And we thought, oh, this would be fun to see if we could connect with some of the relatives in this photo. So we ended up connecting with the daughter of one of the soldiers that my grandfather served with. So that was fun because she didn't have any pictures, didn't know much about her dad. And so we were able to fill in a lot of gaps for her. That was a really nice story too.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like World War II also. So I'm gonna have to send you my uncle Tom, who was in Iwo Jima.
Okay.
And he drove one of the boats. I'll send it to you so you can send it to your dad.
Yes.
His great grandson interviewed him about his exploits in World War II and getting lost in the Pacific Ocean.
Oh my goodness!
Got lost.
Oh my goodness, that's scary.
And they were out there in the middle of nowhere by themselves. But
yeah, I do come across a lot of military photos. The Civil War ones excite me. I grew up learning about my Civil War ancestor who suffered and died in Andersonville prison camp when he was only in his 30s. Awful. He had 4 sons that he left behind. I'm descended through one of the 4 sons. The other 3 never had children. And my family took a trip down to Andersonville, Georgia to pay our respects a couple of Veterans Days ago. And let me tell you, what a beautiful place. Very well kept. They have an awesome museum. If you ever have a chance, even if you're not connected to anybody from Andersonville, it is an experience, very sobering experience. Yeah. And so anyway, I do acquire a lot of photos from different wars. And when I was giving a presentation, a live presentation for a historical society in Rhode Island. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. This woman came up to me after the presentation and she said, here, I want you to have this photo album. I bought it about 50 years ago at an antique store, and I've tried over the years to try and reconnect with relatives, and I just haven't had any success. So I heard about your project. That's why I came to hear your presentation, and I'd like to donate this to the project. And I was just speechless because this album was absolutely beautiful. And I said to her, I'm like, please let me give you something for this. She said, no, I want you to have this for the project. Have fun. I said, okay. And so I connected with this gentleman from Freeport, Maine. His name is Stuart Breitzman. And he responded and he said, I can't believe you found this album. I'm related to virtually everyone in this album. There's a picture in there of my dad as a little boy I've never seen before. My grandfather, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it, they were all in there. There were only like a couple of photos that, even though everything was labeled, we couldn't make the family connection. And so I said to him, I said, all right, awesome. It's yours. I'll mail it up to you. And he said, oh no. He's like, I want to come to you. He's like, I'm retired. I'll make the trip down. I said, all right. So we spent an awesome afternoon going through every photo, verifying who everybody was. He brought his laptop down and we've become friends. And it was just such a beautiful, exciting, gift that kept on giving. And one of the photos that was in this album, the most historically significant, was of his Civil War ancestor who also suffered at Andersonville and was a POW in multiple prison camps and wrote a book about his experiences in it. And he had never seen a photo of him before. So it was just amazing. It was amazing all around. And even that we had this Andersonville connection together. And to this day, it's my favorite success story. It's awesome. And recently we took a trip up to Maine and he came with my husband and me to the antique stores so that he could see the process firsthand. And he's like, I totally see now why you're so addicted. This is fun. So I have him looking for photos up in Freeport, Maine for me now. It's wonderful.
Oh, well, I'm going to start looking down here.
Yeah.
I'm in Red Bank. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So Charles has a question for you,
Mhm.
Kate.
Sure. Let's see. My brother Bob oh man, I'm sorry. I have a good photo of him. I also have 2 photos of a Christmas party he was at. I can't find him in there. I can send the photos right now if you can ID him. So, yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be happy to take a look. Is the photo, hold on one second. Yeah, I mean, I can take a look. I mean, it's tough trying to determine who people are because of the lighting and the type of camera and everything, but I can certainly take a look at that. Sure, I'd be happy to.
And so that's a good lead-in question to if somebody has photos that they want to contribute or they have photos of family that they can't, how do they get that to you?
Yep. So I have a Photo Angel website where you can send me an email and I'll provide you with my home address. You can send it to me. And if you're local, then we can meet up. That's fun too.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll put all those links. Out there on the blog and everything. And also now, I'm assuming you self-fund some of this, but do people help you out with donations or postage or things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So, I don't charge families for returned photos or items. That's my gift to them. But people have been extremely generous with donations of stamps, monetary donations. I've gotten envelopes, photos. Photo Angel mail is so much fun. I come home from school. I'm like, ooh, I wonder what's in the mailbox now. Like, it keeps going. And I have a mini museum now in my home, in my Photo Angel office. So, I mean, yeah, so it's a good thing that I'm making connections as fast as I do because they're coming in as fast as they're going out.
That's great. And what do you teach? I know you were.
I'm a special education teacher.
Oh, so,
Yes.
so you two special things that you do is this,
Thank
and you're a
you.
special ed teacher.
Thank you.
My son was in special ed for
Okay.
a number of years, and
Yeah.
you guys are special breed, that's for sure.
Thank
No
you.
question about that.
The kids are the best.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't. It's people don't understand.
Right.
People just don't understand.
Right.
But it's hard for the teachers. It's hard for the kids, and you have to be a special person to be able to do that. Oh, so Charles was born in Corona. So my family's from
Oh.
Corona.
Huh. That's cool.
And that's true. You find out when you do this stuff, you really find some strange connections. Too.
Right. I do have an Italian success story if you'd like me to share that.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
So early on in the project, I was at an antique store in Rhode Island, and I came across quite a few photos of this 1926 high school class. And I tracked down the gentleman in the photograph's son, and he was so excited because he didn't have a large copy of the graduation photo. He had like a small reprint. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I said, all right, what's your address? I'll mail it out to you. And he said, I don't live too far from you. Why don't we meet up? I said, okay. So it was about an hour from us. So we drove out to the Worcester area and spent a lovely afternoon chatting about his Italian immigrant family who had come over and started a dairy farm. And this dairy farm progressed into a milk supplier for the whole town, and then a distributor for how do I want to say this, for that whole area, that metro area. So they still have an ice cream stand there. So after we had gone through the photos that he had brought to show me of his ancestors, which was so cool, because he was showing me, all the information that was written down in Italian, and it had pictures of the cows in the 1800s of the dairy farm and everything. And just to see how much it had grown since then was unbelievable. And he was just so thankful and so supportive of the project. And it's awesome. It was one of my favorite stories.
Well, that's interesting. It was my great grandfather was the town milkman in Torito, Italy. But he used to walk through the streets with the cow.
Oh, I love it. That's cute.
And you brought your bucket out and he milked the cow.
Oh my gosh, that's a riot. That's a cute story.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny. And my oldest uncle didn't. When my grandparents came, they left him behind with his grandparents, and he didn't come here until 1950 with his family. So there was a whole. He had never met his brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And he hadn't seen his parents in, like, I don't know, 35 or 40 years or something like that.
Wow. That's crazy to think about, right?
Yeah. They had left him there. And I have his story. My cousin interviewed him before he passed away, and I have his whole story. And he, when they sent for him, he didn't want to come because he grew up with his grandparents. That was the only family that he knew. And then he got married. World War II broke out, and then he couldn't come as part of his family because he was over 18. So he had to apply. They actually lived in Canada for 5 years.
Wow.
And I guess it was, I don't know if it was 1954 when they finally got to America. They lived in Canada for like 5 years, something like that. So, yeah, and I was lucky that my cousin actually interviewed him. And it's a real, I mean, they grew up they actually had a house, which was unusual, especially
Right.
back then.
Right.
But it was a 2-room house,
Mm-hmm.
and there was my cousin told me there was the bedroom for she told me my aunt and uncle and the newest baby would sleep in the
Mm.
bedroom, and everybody else was in the kitchen, living
Oh my
room,
gosh.
family
Right.
room,
Right.
children's bedroom. It was all the same room.
Right. Oh, that's cute.
Um, but that's the way it was back then.
Right. That's right.
So before we go,
Mhm.
just tell us how everybody could get in touch with you again, either on
Sure.
Facebook or on your
Mhm.
website. And
Yeah, sure. So the Photo Angel Facebook group is the best way to see all of the activity. It's a lot of fun because I share my success stories and encourage other people to share theirs as well. So they're from all over the country and some internationally. It's really cool. I also have an Instagram and a YouTube channel and my Photo Angel website. So you can find me. I'm around.
yes, just look for Photo Angel and you'll
Yeah.
find Kate.
Yeah.
And you also have another group on Facebook where people could post their own pictures too, right?
Oh, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, it's called Heirloom Show and Tell. And it's a place where you can share photos of your family members or heirlooms from your family members. I was so fortunate to have a great aunt who labeled all of our heirlooms. So it's wonderful because I know what every I can't tongue tied who everybody belonged to. It was just so fascinating and so exciting that I had all of these wonderful things in my possession because I was the family historian, if you will. So it all passed down to me. So it's fun to hear other people's stories as well.
Absolutely. And that's what I enjoy so much about this. Well, thank you so much again. And as soon as I find some photos, I'm going to be sending them to you.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
That was my pleasure. Thanks.